pressure? Oh no! Nothing worse than planting a garden to have it overrun by pests. So let's plan for 2024 to have good success. Spring is coming. The seed catalogs are arriving in the mail. Woohoo! It's time to plan. What are you going to plant? How about an edible landscaping where everything is edible? Wouldn't that be great? But edible for who? Who's going to eat it? Well, who needs to eat? People need to eat, right? Land animals, flying animals, insects, microorganisms, they all need to eat. But have we considered that? I know for me, in my past, my focus has been on people. Let's make sure that we can eat. Let's make sure that we have everything that we need to eat. But what about the other things that need to eat? They also need to survive, and they're part of the ecosystem. The more we take care of them, the more they create the environment that we need so that we can grow better food for ourselves. It needs to be a complete whole picture, not just thinking only of ourselves. Our Father is so amazing in his creation. Did you know he made 1 million insect species? 1 million. So that's a lot of bugs. It's a very big number, but guess how many of those bugs are actual pests or problems for us in the garden? 1%. Bet you didn't guess that. 1%. That means that 99,000 species are actually benign or beneficials. So a benign is something that doesn't cause a problem in your garden. It doesn't eat the pests that are causing a problem in your garden. What the benigns do is they help to shred up the material in the soil. So they're composting for us. They're creating better soil structure, nutrients in the soil. They're doing lots of jobs to keep our soil food web intact and to keep that healthy, but they're not necessarily eating our pests. But the beneficials are, and they are eating that 1% that we don't like that cause us problems. Some of the common ones that you might be familiar with are lacewings and ladybugs, ground beetles, spiders, and butterflies. But 990,000, that means there's a lot of these good guys. So Abba does have our back in the garden. So what do these beneficials do for us? They actually spend their day eating aphids, insect eggs, cutworms, and so many more. They are who we want in the garden. So while you're taking out your books and you're planning what you're going to have in your garden this year, make sure that you plant for the 99% of the insects. We want to invite them in to dwell among us and create this ecosystem so they can go to work eating that 1% that we don't want to have. So what do the beneficials like? Well, flowers. So you want to make sure that you have flowers blooming all the time. So that's why when you buy a butterfly garden mix, for example, it contains flowers that bloom at different stages so that there's always some sort of a flower blooming for these beneficials to take advantage of. But keep in mind that you want to have lots of different flower types because there's lots of different mouth shapes. Different shapes of mouth, length of tongue, different ways that the animal takes up the nectar or the good things that are in that flower. And so you want to have a wide variety of flowers so that you can provide for that as well. So here we run into the same thing I say over and over again, that diversity is key. It's key for everything. So diversity in your compost pile, because you want to have all kinds of different nutrients that end up being in your finished compost, diversity in the plants that you have in the garden, diversity in the plants that you're eating so that you can have diversity with gut bacteria strains in your gut. We are supposed to have 36,000 strains in our gut, right? And that comes from eating a diverse amount of plants, because plant fiber is what keeps your gut bacteria alive. If you're not feeding it a certain food group, those strains of bacteria are going to starve off and die. And so diversity just seems to be the key in everything. I imagine when the Father created this earth that most of the earth was like a rainforest. It was just very diverse in its populations of everything, animals and bugs and species and food. But today, about 70% of the earth has been degraded and the deserts are expanding where there's no life at all. And that's because of what we've done to the earth, not our Father's creation. So we need to get back to diversity in all things. When it comes to talking about planning your garden and planning for a pollinator garden as well, When Stacy and I attended the Echo Global Farm, their international conference last November, one of the statistics that really stuck with me was they did an experiment where they had people plant a pollinator garden. Now, they did a 10-foot by 20-foot garden next to their actual garden. And this pollinator garden was just to have plants available to attract these 990,000 beneficial or benign species, right? To attract the beneficials. Those that did that experienced a 50% increased yield in their food that they harvested from their garden. Now, 50% is a huge number. But not only did they have a greater yield, but they had stronger, healthier plants that produced stronger seeds to save for the next season. So it's absolutely worth it. Now, I don't know what size gardens they had next to this 10-foot by 20-foot garden bed, but just start implementing as many plants as possible to attract the good guys that need to come and eat our 1% pests. Just start planting. Now, beyond insects, birds are also beneficial. I used to think of birds as a problem for the garden, and that's not the case. Birds, what do birds eat? Worms, right? Well, do you have cutworms in your garden? I mean, birds love to eat worms and insects and stuff. So you definitely want birds to be around where you are gardening. Now, birds can be a problem if you've just planted seeds that the birds like to eat. They might dig up those seeds. So just take some shade cloth. Put a piece of shade cloth over where you've planted your seeds, and the birds will not be able to get to them. And then when harvest time comes, if you have berries or something that's very attractive to your birds, just simply buy some bird netting and cover that area with bird netting during the harvest season, and it's fine. And the whole rest of the time you have the benefit of the birds. Plus, who doesn't love the beauty and the enjoyment of birds singing and being part of your garden? I'm actually interested in starting to learn the different types of birds that are visiting my garden and paying attention to them. So what do birds need? They need water, food, and shelter, right? So let's do that for them. We can easily provide water by getting a bird bath. That's an easy thing to do and enjoyable. A bird feeder, just make sure you find a bird feeder that squirrels cannot get into, and that will be fine. And then they also need a nice place of shelter. So make sure you have trees and shrubs that are somewhat near your garden, so they have a place where they can go and bear young and be protected from their predators. But birds aren't the only one that need provision for water, shelter, and food. Insects also need a place of shelter. So an insect hotel is something fun that you can get and put up in your garden. You can make it yourself. There's plans online, but to buy one is like $20. I think the most expensive one I saw was $30. So it's not outrageous. So go ahead and get one of those. So your 990,000 have somewhere where they can call home. Then we have other pests that can be a problem that the beneficials don't seem to want to eat, and that would be ants. Ants can really be a problem. I have tried all of the natural home remedies that are supposed to take care of fire ants, and they just haven't worked for me. The only thing that works for me is to take one of those electric tea kettles and pour boiling water down the hole, and then replace that with compost so I can rebuild the soil bacteria and the soil-based organisms that should be there that I'm going to kill along with the ants. But, wouldn't God have a natural solution for ants? I mean, he wouldn't create something without having a natural solution for it, right? Well, here it is. The ant eater. Yay! You can actually buy an ant eater at tropical pet stores. Can you believe that? Exotic pet stores actually sell these guys. Now, this is something more appropriate for a tropical climate like my friends who live in Florida. But yes, you can get one, and in 2 days, an ant eater will eat all of your ants and termites, and they can be trained to a leash. How awesome is that? I've asked Dave if we could please get one, but he's not up for it yet. So I encourage anybody who has maybe a homeschool family, what an awesome project this would be to learn how to take care of an ant eater. And you could take that into a business and go and farm it out to other people who need someone to come and eat their ants and their termites. So God has a solution for every problem. So as you plan and you get started and your garden gets going this spring, if you're up north, I want to make sure that you know about this resource. If you're going to take care of a problem in your garden, number one, you need to diagnose what the problem is. Is it a plant disease or is it a plant pest? I mean, you need to actually diagnose what's going on. And so when it comes to diagnosing the pests, like you have all these insects, right? 1,000,000 insects. Which ones are good and which ones are bad? Like a ladybug in its pupa stage looks like a bad. It looks like something we should get rid of, but it's really a developing ladybug. So you want to be able to identify those. I recommend this app. It's called Picture Insect. And that little icon there is what the picture looks like for the icon for the app. You can get it. Now, it does cost $20 or $30 for the year, but if you want to have a successful garden, invest in something that will help you have success in the area of pests for sure. So then you can take the app and you can, when you discover a pest in the garden, just take a picture of it and the app will tell you what that pest is. From there, you can do your research on best solutions for getting rid of it. Now, a lot of times you can just simply hand pick the pests off if you stay ahead of it. So getting out in your garden, going for that daily walk in the garden and observing your plants is so important because you can see the pests before they start becoming a huge problem. For me, I personally don't like to pick the pest off and squish it with my fingers. I don't really enjoy that. So I take a jar, I fill it with water, a canning jar, and I have a lid on it. And then when I'm going around, and I just get one of those solid one-piece plastic lids. It's a little easier than dealing with the two-piece lid in the garden. Then when I'm going through and I'm checking my garden out each morning and taking my little walk and having my time with the Lord out there, if I see a pest, I just take the lid off of my canning jar and I push it into the jar of water, and I can use the lid to push it in, or maybe the leaf that it's sitting on and push it into that jar of water and put the lid back on right away. And when I'm done with my walk, I have whatever pests collected and I can go in the house and I just dump it in the toilet and give it a flush. Bye, bye, bye. That's what I do for hand picking. Some pests actually glow in the dark at night, and you can get a black flashlight and go out there. For some pests it works, and you can flash this black flashlight on your garden and they will glow and you can just pick them off. So there's lots of different ways, but that seems to be effective. Another very effective plan, if you're looking at what you're going to plant this year and what are you going to plant in this garden bed and that garden bed, is to plant by plant families. So there's over 600 different plant families, so it can seem like a lot, but most of us only use 11. There's 11 or 12 plant families that most of us use. Like, for example, onions and garlics are in the alum family. So if you can learn those 11 or 12, it's a quick Google search to find out what those 11 or 12 main plant families are, and then plant your beds by plant family. So example, the mustard family, that's all of your brassicas. That would be broccoli and radish and turnips and rutabaga and collard greens and cauliflower, Brussels sprouts. All of those are in the same family. So then you could take your garden bed and you plant all of those that belong to that family, can be all intermixed in there, and you plant that. But certain pests are attracted to certain plant families. So if you rotate by plant family, you can prevent a certain pest from becoming overpopulated in one particular area. And keep in mind, they can put their eggs in the soil and stuff like that. And I've heard it recommended that when you rotate and you had nightshades growing in one plant bed, like a planting bed, and all nightshades would be tomatoes, potatoes. So if you have potatoes or tomatoes or peppers or something like that growing, I've heard it recommended that you actually change out the soil when you rotate into your next plant family after nightshades. But learning to rotate by plant families can be a very effective plan for preventing and keeping your pest pressure low. The other thing you can do is make sure that your garden beds stay mulched. Now, there's lots of reasons to keep your beds mulched. No bare soil. Everything has to have a covering. Not only retains moisture and just helps to break down and feed your soil. So no black tarps. You actually want to alternate with greens and browns as you're mulching, so that can break down and continue to feed and nourish and enrich the soil and all the things that are living in your soil. But when it comes to pests, pests will lay eggs in your soil. And so if you have a thick layer of mulch, it's a lot less likely that these pests are going to go down through that mulch layer to lay their eggs. They'll probably go somewhere else where it's not as much trouble. So that can be helpful for your pests. And then the other thing is to keep in mind your watering. Now, it seems that in general, garden beds do better if the water is coming from underneath. If you think about the way God designed the earth, before the flood of Noah, we had the plants being watered by mist that came up from under the ground. And so it was coming up, it was nourishing the roots right at their level, and then coming up and nourishing the surface of the soil. And so today we're in a different system where the rain is coming down, and there's actually some plants that don't really like their leaves getting wet. And so if you can guard water from underneath, it can be better, especially in the area of preventing disease and pests in your garden. I particularly like what's called Oyas. This book here called Gardening with Less Water, that's a book that teaches all about using Oyas. And this method of watering your garden actually dates back to the ancient people called the Shemites. Well, who are the Shemites? They came from the descendants of Shem. What did Noah and his family decide to do as a solution for watering? They didn't just sit and rely on rainwater. They actually created Oyas, which is a form of ancient pottery. But you can make them today. Just go to YouTube and search how to make an Oya. It's Ollas. And you can pull it up and you can just take two garden pots, unglazed terracotta pots from Walmart or Lowe's, and you flip one upside down and you glue them together. It's very simple with silicone, and you glue it together and stick them in the garden. It's very easy to do. And then you just fill up the Oya once or twice a week, and it holds onto that water. And the pot itself is very porous, so it'll slowly leak. But mostly what's happening is the roots and the micro rhizae fungi that's in the soil are going to go in through that porous layer and extract the water, and they will take out exactly what they want. So now your plants are actually taking only what they want, no more water, no less water. You're going to save 70% on your water costs, and you'll have a better result in your garden because they're getting only what they need for water. If you're having problems and you don't have enough beneficials and you just can't seem to stay ahead of your pests, this is a recipe that seems to work for most garden pests, for most of that 1%. And you simply take a gallon of water and you mix a tablespoon of neem oil and a tablespoon of Sal Suds. Now, Sal Suds is just a biodegradable soap. And you're going to mix that together. It's helpful if you take like 1 cup of water and mix it with the oil and soap first, and then pour it into your container, because otherwise it can get too sudsy. But I get this little device here. It's called a Hudson Fog electronic atomizer. That's what I use. And if you want, you can invest in a larger one that has straps to wear like a backpack. So it depends upon the size of your garden. But that will actually, it'll atomize. It'll like take the spray, the water that you're spraying, and get it in such a fine particle that it'll really help penetrate and get into those pests that you want to get rid of. But the good news is it's actually good for your garden. The plants receive benefit from the neem. It's good for them, but it's not good for the pests, and it doesn't harm beneficials. So that's a very good recipe, and you can do a routine where once a week you're spraying with that, and then once a week you're putting a garden fertilizer like compost tea. So once a week you can put compost tea into your atomizer and then spray that in between. So let's say you're going to spray neem every Wednesday, then maybe every Sunday you'll come along and spray it with your compost tea. And that's a very healthy regimen for your garden, and it'll help to take control over those pests until you get good populations of beneficials visiting your garden or living in your garden. So why not use insecticides? Well, the 2 main reasons not to is that some of the pests will survive and they will pass on their resistance to the next generation of pests. So you think about the insecticides being used commercially, they have to keep getting stronger and different solutions because of this problem. And so it's better if we can not use those. And then the second reason is some of them will kill your beneficial and your benign species, which we need them, and we don't want to get rid of them. We're trying to increase those populations. So I hope this will help you to see the big picture, that you're not just trying to create this small little area of food just for you, but that we're trying to create an ecosystem and be part of the restoration of all things, and that we can have this abundant diversity in rainforest again, and that we can help to restore mankind back to the garden and back to the way we were supposed to take care of the earth. So I wish you the best as you prepare and plan for your 2024 garden. Remember, learning how to garden is a process. Every year you learn more. It's Some years aren't as great as other years, but the point is to get started. Don't start too big. Start a little at a time. People who start too big usually end up quitting. Start a little at a time. Make your plan. Work your plan. And each year stay at it, and we will get stronger and better over time as we return to the Father's ways. Bye for now.